What are the creeds in the Bible? Now, if you're familiar with Christian history, you'll know that the creeds, the ecumenical creeds, such as the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian Creed, these came much later, 300 BC, 500 BC, 700 BC, and were incorporated into the belief system of Christianity as they were introduced in later times. Some have asked, are these creeds found in the Bible, or are there creeds in the Bible that we can find? Well, if you're interested in that topic, let's explore together. Now, a creed is a formal summary of religious belief often used to define orthodoxy or draw doctrinal boundaries. The most well-known creeds that you may be familiar with are the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, the Athanasian Creed, but there were many more creeds that were submitted, although not all accepted, by the early Christian fathers. Other documents came later, such as the Westminster Confession of Faith, which became Creedal for Christianity and may not be referred to as a creed, but definitely played a creedal role in the foundation of modern Christianity as we know it. As we explore the Old Testament and the New Testament, we do find scriptures that are creedal in nature, in that they provide a formal statement of belief or encourage us to conform to a certain idea in a very specific and creedal way. But I will leave it to you, the viewer, after we've examined these, to decide if there are any creeds specifically in the Bible. All right, let's take a look at some of these. In Deuteronomy 6, we have what's called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by thy way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Now you can sense the instructive nature of this, right? And how it kind of clearly defines kind of what we're supposed to believe and how we're supposed to believe it. These words, of course, were given by God directly to Moses and then disseminated to the children of Israel, and from there to the rest of humanity through the teachings recorded here in the Bible. But are they a creed? Let's take a look at the next one. In Matthew 16, we gain a glimpse of Peter's testimony of Christ. Christ asks Peter and the other apostles, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they said, "Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He saith unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." Now, this statement, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God," has been used in many creeds, and it is somewhat creedal in the manner in which it is stated, but is it a creed? Let's go to the next example. To the Corinthians, Paul stated, "To us there is but one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him." Now, if you've read the creeds lately, the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed or even the Athanasian Creed, you will sense some similar language that it's drawn from statements like this. And so a statement like this in Corinthians is creedal in nature, but this is not a technical creed. This is a statement of belief and instruction to the people of Corinthians, and of course to us in these days, by Paul. But to become a creed, it needs to be a summary, a formal summary of a religious belief. In Timothy, we get another example. It says, "Without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh, justified in the Spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory." Once again, this language is very similar to the language used in the early creeds. But the question is this statement of belief a formal summary of what it is to be Christian? The last example I'd like to share with you comes from Romans. In Romans 10, Paul says that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. I would submit that's probably the closest thing we have to a creed in the New Testament. It's instructive, and it could define what it is to be Christian in this sense. But alas, I don't believe that any of these are actual creeds in the Bible. They are creedal in nature, and these are the very scriptures that informed some of the language of the later creeds of Christianity. But the later creeds were drawn up and formalized and submitted by councils seeking to clearly define what it was to be or not be part of their faith. So there are no formal creeds in the Bible, at least not in the way that we define creeds today. However, the Bible does contain statements of belief and instruction and what we would call proto-creeds today. Thanks for tuning in today. If you like this content and you'd like to see more, you may be interested in this next topic, which is who wrote the book of Mark in the Bible. See you next time, friends.